Ladies and gentlemen, in a world full of noise and constant hustle, choosing to stay silent can feel like a radical act. Yet silence holds a unique power. It creates space for clarity, self-trust, and growth to emerge naturally. By embracing stillness, we learn to listen deeply, respond thoughtfully, and trust that everything we need will come to us in its own time. In a world that thrives on noise, speed, and constant expression, the power of silence is often underestimated. Yet silence has an intelligence of its own. It is in silence that we begin to see clearly what is hidden behind the distractions of daily life. When we choose not to fill every moment with reaction or response, we start noticing the subtle truths about our experiences and ourselves. The clarity that emerges in silence is not accidental. It is the result of allowing space for truth to surface, free from interruption or distortion. It's not that answers magically appear because we are silent, but rather that silence removes the interference that blocks us from seeing what's already there. We are constantly speaking, defending, explaining, or justifying. We often drown out the quiet voice within us that carries deep wisdom. This inner voice doesn't shout, it whispers. It's the voice of intuition, of inner knowing, and it requires stillness to be heard. Most of us are trained to act quickly, to solve immediately, to explain ourselves at every turn. But what if some of the most important answers come not from speaking more, but from listening deeper? In silence, the fog starts to lift. Not because everything changes, but because our perspective does. This internal clarity is not about overthinking. It's not the kind of quiet where the mind is racing with anxiety or scenarios. It's a calm, centered silence, the kind that arises when we allow ourselves to be present without needing to fix, control, or solve. This state gives us access to emotional truth. Instead of reacting based on old wounds, expectations, or fear, we begin to understand what's really happening underneath our surface responses. We might realize that our anger is masking sadness, or that our withdrawal is actually a longing for connection. These insights often don't come when we are speaking or busy. They arrive when we make space for them. We stay silent. We are not being passive or disengaged. We are being deliberate. We are choosing not to rush the process of understanding. The world teaches us that if we don't speak up fast enough, we'll be forgotten. But inner wisdom doesn't operate on urgency. It moves with intention. And the clarity that arises in silence is not the kind that fades. It's the kind that stays with us, guiding our actions from a place of depth. It helps us become less reactive and more responsive, less consumed by appearance, and more committed to authenticity. Many of us fear silence because it forces us to sit with ourselves. It takes us out of performance mode and into presence. There's no applause in silence, no validation, just you, your thoughts, your heart, your truth. That can be intimidating, but it is also where transformation begins. When we resist the urge to fill space with words, we begin to learn the difference between what is urgent and what is important. We begin to recognize what actually matters and what we've been clinging to out of habit or fear. Silence is also where we start hearing life differently. The details we miss when we're too busy to notice, the way someone looks when they're hurting but can't say it out loud, the way our own body feels when it's tired and needs rest, the whisper of clarity about a decision we've been avoiding, all become audible in silence. In this way, silence becomes a teacher, not just a pause. It doesn't give us all the answers at once, but it clears the emotional noise that was keeping us stuck. We begin to understand our patterns, our pain, and our power. We begin to choose more consciously rather than act on autopilot. What comes to us in silence is not just clarity about others or situations, but clarity about ourselves, our boundaries, our needs, our values. When we honor silence, we honor ourselves. We no longer need to chase clarity from outside sources because we've learned to create the conditions for it to arise from within. And once that clarity arrives, we act not from pressure, but from peace. That shift, moving from noise to stillness, from urgency to groundedness, is where everything begins to change. In a world that often measures worth by how loud, visible, or productive we are, choosing to be still and silent can feel countercultural. Yet there is a kind of quiet strength in simply being present without trying to prove, perform, or persuade. The idea of presence over performance invites us to reconsider what it means to be powerful. True presence doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't demand applause or recognition. It's grounded, authentic, and connected to something deeper than public approval. Performance, on the other hand, is exhausting. It pulls us away from who we are and into who we think we need to be for others. It turns life into a stage where every word and action is filtered through the lens of perception and validation. We perform. We often do so out of fear of not being enough, fear of being overlooked, fear of being rejected. That fear drives us to speak when we could listen, to act when we could wait, to push when we could trust. But when we choose presence, We shift from proving to simply being. We stop managing how we're seen and start paying attention to what's actually happening within and around us. That shift is subtle, but profound. It allows us to bring our whole imperfect and honest selves into every space without needing to put on a mask. Presence invites us to be open, to be in a moment without manipulating it. It's the courage to be seen for who we are, not who we perform to be. It's eye contact, active listening, grounded silence, and full awareness. It's knowing we don't have to fill space to be valuable. This kind of presence can only emerge when we're comfortable with quiet, not just external quiet, but internal quiet. And that's where silence becomes our ally. It helps us reset the need to perform and reconnect with the truth that we are already enough, even if no one is clapping. So much of performance is rooted in scarcity. The belief that there's not enough attention, love, or success to go around makes us compete and compare. It drives us to speak louder, move faster, and present better. But presence is born from abundance. It trusts that we don't have to hustle for worthiness, that we can trust timing, trust process, and most importantly, trust ourselves. In silence, we can examine the motives behind our actions. Are we acting from alignment or for applause? Are we leading from our values or trying to avoid discomfort? These questions don't get answered in noise. They require stillness and honesty. We stop performing and start being. We create deeper connections. People feel it when we're present. They sense safety, sincerity, and attention. There's a power in being fully with someone, not distracted, not rehearsing a response, not waiting to make a point, but truly with them. Presence is the foundation of empathy, and empathy is the foundation of meaningful connection. This is something that performance can't replicate, no matter how polished or articulate we are. Letting go of performance also gives us freedom. We no longer have to manage every interaction as if it's an audition. We stop scripting our lives and start living them. We take up space in a different way, not with volume or decoration, but with grounded energy. Silence helps us learn that space is not something we need to fill with noise. Sometimes just showing up fully and truthfully is more powerful than any words we could say. This shift also changes how we experience challenges. When we're performing, failure feels like exposure, like a stage collapse. But when we're present, failure becomes information, not a verdict, but a guide. We can process it without shame because we're not attaching our worth to the outcome. Presence allows us to learn and grow, while performance pressures us to maintain an illusion of control. That's why silence is so essential. It breaks the illusion and brings us back to truth. The most authentic people aren't the loudest or most visible. They're the ones who are most at peace with themselves. They don't need to dominate a room to have an impact. Their energy speaks for them. Their presence creates a quiet confidence that doesn't need external proof. That kind of presence is powerful because it's real, and it's built in moments of stillness, where we remind ourselves that we don't need to be seen a certain way to matter. We just need to show up fully, honestly, and with a willingness to be ourselves. There is something profoundly transformative about learning to trust yourself, especially in a world that constantly pulls you in different directions. Every day, we're bombarded with opinions, advice, judgments, and expectations. It's easy to become disconnected from our own inner guidance and all that noise. But when we choose silence, when we step away from the urgency of answering, reacting, or pleasing, we create the space to reconnect with ourselves. This reconnection is not superficial. It is deep, grounding, and necessary for building the kind of self-trust that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. Silence doesn't mean disengagement. It means making room to hear your own voice again, to learn how it sounds when it's not competing with everything and everyone else. In the stillness of silence, we begin to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment. We notice what makes us feel anxious, what gives us peace, what drains us, and what energizes us. These observations become internal data, guiding us toward choices that are more aligned with our values and needs. Self-trust isn't something we find, it's something we build, moment by moment, decision by decision. And the foundation of that trust is formed in the quiet moments when no one else is watching or validating us. It's built when we learn to say no without guilt, when we pause before reacting, when we give ourselves time to reflect before choosing a path forward. This kind of trust doesn't require certainty about everything. It asks for honesty with yourself. It's saying, I may not have all the answers yet, but I believe I can find them within me. That belief grows stronger the more we practice silence. When we don't rush to fill space, we get to witness our natural rhythm. We discover how we feel when we're not performing or trying to meet someone else's expectations. In those moments, we begin to see our worth as something intrinsic, not something earned through effort or approval. That's the essence of self-trust, knowing you are enough, even when you're not proving it. Silence also helps us regulate our emotional responses. Instead of reacting impulsively to every challenge or discomfort, we begin to cultivate a pause. In that pause lies our power, the ability to choose a response rooted in clarity rather than fear. We often associate control with dominance or action, but real control often looks like restraint, patience, and reflection. The ability to sit with discomfort without immediately escaping it is a sign of deep self-trust. It tells us, I can handle this. I don't need to fix it right now. I can feel it and still be okay. That doesn't mean silence is always comfortable. In fact, it can be incredibly challenging to sit with your own thoughts, especially if you've spent years running from them or drowning them out. But discomfort is not the enemy. It's the doorway to understanding, healing, and eventually peace. When we stop fearing what we might find in silence, we start discovering who we really are beneath the noise. We stop seeking answers outside of ourselves and start realizing that many of them are already within us, just waiting for the right moment, the right space to be heard. Learning to trust yourself doesn't happen all at once. It's a process of remembering, of returning, of choosing your own voice again and again. It's built every time you honor your intuition, every time you rest when your body needs it, every time you speak your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Silence gives you the room to practice this. It's not an escape from life, but a return to what is essential. The more time you spend in silence, the more familiar your inner voice becomes, and the more familiar it becomes, the more you'll trust it, even when others don't understand it. The beauty of self-trust is that it becomes your anchor. When chaos swirls around you, when opinions try to pull you in every direction, when the pressure to perform rises, you can return to the stillness you've cultivated. In that stillness, you find your compass. You remember that you don't need to force or chase or prove. You can simply be. And in being, you allow the next step to rise naturally, guided not by fear or noise, but by the quiet confidence you've built in yourself. In every moment of conflict, challenge, or pressure, there is a space between what happens to us and how we choose to respond. That space, though often overlooked, holds the potential for personal power and emotional growth. The difference between reaction and response lies in what we do with that space. When we react, it's often automatic. It's quick, impulsive, and usually driven by emotion, anger, fear, shame, or frustration. These reactions are not inherently wrong, they are human. But when they are habitual and unexamined, they can lead us into patterns that don't serve our growth. Silence helps us stretch that space. It invites us to pause and recognize the feeling before acting on it. That pause is where awareness is born. And from awareness, we gain the ability to choose differently. Silence doesn't just muffle chaos, it introduces perspective. Instead of being swept up in the urgency of the moment, silence invites us to step back and ask, what is really happening here? It helps us understand not just the situation, but our relationship to it. Maybe the anger we feel is not just about the current moment, but about a boundary that has been crossed repeatedly. Maybe our silence in a conversation isn't about avoidance, but about protecting our energy. These realizations don't come through noise or haste, they surface in stillness. When we give ourselves the grace to feel without immediately fixing. Our reactions are often rooted in old narratives, stories we carry from childhood, past trauma, or conditioned beliefs. Someone ignores our opinion, and we feel invisible, just like we did when we weren't heard as a child. Someone questions our choices, and we feel attacked, reminded of every moment we've doubted ourselves. These are natural emotional imprints, but they are not facts. They are interpretations, and they can be reframed. Silence gives us the breathing room to examine these stories. In that examination, we find not only truth, but the freedom to respond from the present moment instead of our past pain. We practice silence in the face of challenge. It is not passivity. It is mastery. It is the act of refusing to give our power away to provocation. It is the recognition that our energy is valuable and that not every situation requires our immediate participation. In fact, some of the most powerful things we'll ever do involve restraint. Choosing not to react can be an act of strength. It's not about suppressing emotions, but about feeling them fully and choosing how and when to express them. That choice is the hallmark of emotional intelligence. The pause that silence offers is also protective. It shields us from regret, from saying things we don't mean, from decisions made in a cloud of emotion. It gives us time to center ourselves, to return to our values, and to ask what outcome we truly want. Sometimes we don't want to win the argument. We want to preserve the relationship. Sometimes we don't need to be right. We need to be at peace. These distinctions only become clear when we step out of the storm of reaction and into the calm of reflection. It's important to acknowledge that this practice takes time. We live in a culture that values quick comebacks, instant responses, and high-speed everything. Slowing down feels unnatural at first, but with consistency, silence becomes a trusted tool. It becomes the buffer that protects your integrity, your clarity, and your emotional well-being. You learn that you don't have to match someone's chaos with more chaos. You can hold your ground with grace, and that kind of poise is not weakness, it's wisdom. Choosing to respond rather than react doesn't mean you don't feel deeply. It means you feel deeply and still choose wisely. It means you honor your emotions without letting them control you. You learn to speak when your words are clear and purposeful, not when they are clouded by temporary feelings. This kind of self-regulation doesn't numb you, it empowers you. It lets you engage in life with intention instead of reactivity. We remember that we are not our emotions, we are the observer of them. We can witness a feeling without becoming it. And from that place, we respond not just with our voice, but with our values. We begin to embody the kind of grounded presence that inspires trust and cultivates connection. Not because we always have the perfect words, but because we've taken the time to ensure those words come from a centered, intentional place. Waiting is often seen as a weakness in a fast-paced world that glorifies speed, urgency, and constant productivity. The idea that good things take time is not just a cliche, it's a truth that silence teaches us repeatedly. When we allow ourselves to embrace silence rather than resist it, we open the door to patience, and through patience we begin to understand the natural rhythm of life. Growth, healing, clarity, and transformation don't happen on demand. They unfold slowly, beneath the surface, often without our conscious awareness. But we live in a culture that tells us to hurry, to solve it now, to reach the goal faster, to never sit in uncertainty. That pressure can cause us to force solutions that aren't ready, chase things that aren't meant for us, or speak before we've truly understood. Silence shifts our relationship with time. It slows us down enough to notice the small signals that rush would have made us miss. The subtle internal nudges, the gentle clarity that whispers instead of shouts, the gut feeling that doesn't operate on logic. These emerge only when we make space for them. It's in the silence that our understanding deepens, not just of the situation, but of ourselves. We start to recognize that waiting isn't the same as inaction. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is pause, to not rush into clarity, but to trust that it will come when we're ready to receive it. We learn to hold space for the unknown. That's one of the hardest things for most people, the uncertainty, the ambiguity, the not yet knowing. But silence helps us build a tolerance for that space. It shows us that clarity often arrives in pieces, that the answer we're looking for may not come all at once, but in layers, like a sunrise revealing the world in stages. We don't need to have everything figured out immediately. We just need to be present, observant, and willing to trust the process. This willingness to wait also strengthens our emotional resilience. When we stop expecting instant outcomes, we begin to value progress over perfection. We learn to celebrate the subtle shifts, the small victories, and the internal changes that precede external transformation. Silence becomes the soil where these changes root themselves deeply before they ever appear on the surface. Just like seeds take time to break through the ground, our own growth requires darkness, stillness, and patience. Rushing that process only weakens what's trying to form. There's also a quiet dignity in waiting without needing to explain yourself. When you know something within you is unfolding, when you're holding space for your own growth or healing, you don't owe anyone an update. Silence gives you the strength to trust your internal process even when the external world is demanding answers. It allows you to protect the sacredness of what's still becoming. This is especially true during seasons of transition, when the old has ended, but the new hasn't fully arrived. Silence teaches you that this in-between isn't empty, it's fertile. Waiting also helps us discern what's truly aligned. When we stop grasping and chasing, what is meant for us has room to come closer. Silence helps us step back from the noise of urgency and reconnect with what we really want, not just what we think we should want. That discernment becomes a powerful tool. It ensures that when we do act, we're moving from a place of wisdom, not desperation. And often what we attract in those quiet spaces is more authentic, more lasting, and more aligned than anything we could have chased on our own timeline. Patience cultivated through silence is not passive, it's deeply active. It requires strength, discipline, and faith. It's the kind of patience that says, I may not see the outcome yet, but I trust that this process is meaningful. And that kind of trust changes how we live. It allows us to breathe more freely, to rest without guilt, to slow down without shame. It shifts us from scarcity to abundance, from thinking there's not enough time to knowing that everything has its season. This mindset allows us to find peace even in uncertainty. We begin to see that waiting doesn't mean life is paused. It means life is preparing. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not working. Silence helps us remember that the most beautiful changes often happen quietly, slowly, and without announcement. They unfold in the waiting, and all we need to do is honor the pace at which they arrive. There is a quiet kind of strength that emerges when you learn to be comfortable with your own company. In a world that often encourages external validation through constant interaction, social media engagement, and public affirmation, finding peace in solitude can feel unfamiliar or even intimidating. Yet the ability to sit in silence and enjoy your own presence is one of the most profound skills you can develop. It's in this solitude that you begin to understand yourself without distraction, without performance, and without the need to fit into anyone else's expectations. When you are no longer afraid of being alone, you become emotionally self-sufficient. You stop chasing noise for the sake of avoiding stillness, and instead begin to embrace it as a sacred space where clarity, healing, and insight quietly unfold. Being at peace with yourself is not about isolation. It's about connection, the kind that starts from within. Silence creates a container where that connection can deepen. In that space, you begin to notice your inner dialogue. You pay attention to how you speak to yourself, what you believe about your worth, and what fears you carry that you may have previously avoided confronting. Without the background noise of the world, your inner world becomes louder, not in a chaotic sense, but in a revealing one. You see yourself more clearly, and in doing so, you begin to heal the parts of you that have been neglected, silenced, or misunderstood. This process also cultivates emotional maturity. You stop depending on others to make you feel whole or validated. You no longer need constant feedback to feel grounded. Instead, you begin to anchor yourself in your own values, your own truth, your own sense of purpose. That doesn't mean you don't value connection. It means your well-being no longer depends on it. Silence helps you unhook from external expectations and reorient toward internal alignment. When you no longer need to be around people just to feel okay, your relationships become more intentional. You choose connection based on shared values and genuine resonance, not on fear of being alone. There's also a spiritual element to this key point. Many ancient traditions emphasize silence as a pathway to the divine, not necessarily in a religious sense, but in the sense of connecting to something greater than yourself. When you silence the outer world, you become more attuned to the inner world, and in that space, a deeper sense of meaning can arise. You begin to realize that you're not just a reflection of your environment. You're a whole being with intuition, wisdom, and creative energy that can only surface when you slow down and listen. Silence becomes the gateway to this deeper dimension of existence. The more time you spend in this kind of quiet, the less you fear it. You stop associating silence with loneliness and begin to associate it with self-possession. You develop rituals around it. Perhaps it's time spent journaling, meditating, walking in nature, or simply sitting in stillness. These moments become restorative. They remind you that you don't have to do, say, or prove anything to be valuable. You just are. And in that being, you begin to touch the essence of who you really are beneath all the roles and masks. You realize that your true self doesn't need an audience. It just needs your presence. As you get more comfortable with yourself, you also become more resilient. When life throws challenges your way, you don't unravel as easily because you've built a solid foundation within. You've learned to rely on your own insight, your own inner calm. You've practiced sitting with discomfort without needing to run from it. This internal capacity makes you more grounded and less reactive. You don't reach for distractions or quick fixes. You know how to be with what is, even when it's uncertain or painful. That's a rare and powerful strength, and it grows in silence. You also begin to notice that silence enhances your creativity and intuition. Without constant noise, your mind has room to wander, to imagine, to connect ideas that would otherwise be drowned out. Some of your best insights won't come when you're trying hard to find them. They'll come when you're quiet enough to receive them. Silence makes space for inspiration, for intuitive nudges, for a kind of knowing that doesn't come from logic, but from a deeper place of wisdom. These moments can shape your life in meaningful ways, not because you chased them, but because you made room for them to appear. Silence is no longer something you turn to only in crisis or confusion. It becomes part of your way of life. You carry it with you into noisy spaces. It becomes an inner stillness that travels with you. And when you can hold that stillness inside, everything external becomes less overwhelming. You become someone who moves with intention rather than impulse, who speaks with purpose rather than pressure, and who chooses presence over performance. This is not about being perfect or always composed. It's about knowing that you can return to yourself at any moment, and that in doing so, everything you need begins to come to you naturally. We choose silence. We begin a powerful journey inward, a journey that transforms how we respond to life, how we understand ourselves, and how we engage with the world around us. In stillness, we learn to listen deeply, not only to others, but to the quiet wisdom within. We stop reacting out of fear or pressure and start responding with clarity and intention. We stop rushing the process and begin to trust in divine timing. We no longer fear solitude, but embrace it as the space where our truest self can emerge. Through silence, we reconnect with our strength, reclaim our peace, and realize that everything we need, growth, healing, purpose, and direction, comes not by force, but by allowing. When we stay silent and stay grounded, life unfolds in ways we never imagined, naturally aligning with who we were always meant to be.